So before I go into the debrief, raise your hand if you're happy with your outcome. That's very tentative, team.
That's different than optimizing, right?
No, I'm just asking happy. Yeah. You're happy with your outcome? Who's happy?
Are both sides happy or is one side happy?
Oh, it could be both sides or one side, whatever. So who's happy with their outcome? You got scared. Okay. Okay, so tentatively happy. Okay, good. Let's see. Okay. That's always an interesting measure. Please take this code and input your outcome into the app or the page where everybody. Okay, this is not used yet, so don't fret. This is from my executive MBA program. So, it's the same dynamic that you did with the same case, and this is their outcome. As you can see, there were 24 people, so it's not you. So let me explain how this works. This indicates the final price. So here you see final price up here, final price down here, final price up there, final price down there. So even with the same instructions, very diverse final prices, right? The diamond, when orange, indicates the first offer was made by the seller, and the counter offer, the green line, was made by the buyer. When the diamond is green, the first offer was made by the buyer, and the counter offer was made by the seller. And again, very different dynamics, right? Different counter offers, different first offers, different distances between counter offers and offers, different final prices in between. So quite diverse. Now, let's start with some important concepts. The first one is reservation point. The reservation point, as you heard me say this morning, is the minimum acceptable price at which I'm willing to sell and the maximum acceptable price at which I'm willing to buy if I'm the buyer. And the distance between the reservation points of the seller and the reservation point of the buyer is called the zone of possible agreement, the ZOPA. That's a technical term. So the zone of possible agreement here, the value of that zone, of course you did not know that, I know because I have all the instructions, is $2,700. So that's the available value to negotiate when I frame the conversation like this. So far, make sense? Okay, so first question, how do I calculate the reservation point? It has to be technical. So the reservation point is somehow influenced or determined more than influenced by your BADNA. What is the BADNA of the seller? Well, the seller could keep on selling the sugar bowl online, and eventually the seller estimates that they can get $300 for the sugar bowl if they keep on selling it online, right? So we say, when we get very technical, but I think it's important to point it out, that the reservation point is equal to the BADNA minus plus or minus idiosyncratic preferences. What does that mean? Because it sounds very technical. It's not that technical. As a seller, I may say, look, I'm sick of this sugar bowl. I want to get rid of it now. I want to take the money and buy something else that is more commercial. So I'm willing to go down to $200. So now I have corrected the reservation point from my BADNA by minus $100 as long as I get the sugar bowl sold now. That's an idiosyncratic preference. Does that make sense? It's important because in real life that can get more sophisticated and more useful to understand. For the buyer, this was my calculation. You could have done it differently for the seller and the buyer. I said, well, why am I interested in buying the sugar bowl? Well, because I have 3 pieces. If I sell the 3 pieces as an incomplete set, I'll probably get $5,000, around $5,000 from a consignment store. I have to wait until they sell it, but that's what I estimate I can get. If I get the sugar bowl, the whole set can go for $8,000. So the maximum I'm willing to pay for the sugar bowl is $3,000, because that's how much value it adds to my existing pieces. Does that make sense? And that's how I calculated the reservation point for both parties. So why, in this case, 95% of people end up happy with their outcome? Because of something which is called the reservation point bias. The reservation point bias, which we mentioned this morning. What is the reservation point bias? Usually, the seller starts thinking like this. I should be okay if I sell the sugar bowl above $300. So if I get $700, that's really good, because I got $400 above my reservation point, almost twice my reservation point, so I did well. Or about for 1,600, my reservation point was 3,000. I did very well. I did, I got a lot of room still between the deal and my reservation point. That's what we call the reservation point bias. And that's a very common mistake people make in negotiation. They use the reservation point as a reference to negotiate. That's why we say never tell your agent your reservation point, because you will bias them. The anchoring effect is extremely powerful. So powerful that it's called, technically, in English, insufficient adjustment to the anchoring effect, which means even people that know the anchoring effect are affected by the anchoring effect. So the trick of debiasing is what? How do you debias your negotiation from a reservation point? The first easy step is don't tell them your reservation point. Because as soon as you tell it, their mindset goes, oh, I can still go down. I'm not going to lose this deal, so I'm going to still go down. What you do is you give them a target. The definition of a target is a target should be ambitious yet realistic. That makes sense, right? And we know that the more ambitious the target, the better people negotiate, because you anchor them to a more ambitious outcome. Does that make sense? So that's called debiasing, which is shifting the attention from the reservation point to the target. But for that, you have to design a target. And the target has to be ambitious and realistic. But you did have the information to do that here. Because as a seller, you know that a similar sugar bowl had been sold between 1,200 and 400. So if you want to be ambitious and realistic, what could your target be? 1,200. I mean, that's they've gone up that far. For the buyer, they knew that a similar sugar bowl had been sold between $1,000 and $300. So what would be an ambitious and realistic target for the buyer? $300. So really think about this. What would have happened if instead of giving you these instructions, I would have given you instructions that only said, try to sell the sugar bowl for 1,200, or try to buy the sugar bowl for 300? Would you have negotiated better? Probably, because your comparison now is not your reservation point. Now your comparison is your target. The same story I told you this morning with the app and all that stuff. So in negotiation, in life, but in negotiation, you have to learn certain cognitive biases and use them to your favor and protect yourself from them, because they're pretty powerful. Most people, when they do this case, most people in real life over-focus on the reservation point. For example, in M&As, right now I'm working with a company, and they want to sell part of their company to an investment fund. They gave, of course, information to the private equity fund so they could make an offer. That's another conversation. And of course, when the equity fund has all this information and the expectations and the projections and all that, they can calculate the net present value of the company. Does that make sense? You who work on acquisitions all the time? But as a seller, what does it mean, net present value for me? That's my reservation point. That's a company run by me. Do you see it? So if as a seller, my reference is, okay, the company is worth $100 million, the net present value of the company with the potential, the whatever, is worth $100 million. That's my reservation point. So if I'm trying to sell simply on above my reservation point, I'm being anchored to my reservation point. Does that make sense?
But people increase their numbers knowing that that's their reservation point. So we try to increase it, we try to get closer to the buyer's reservation.
That's a sophisticated seller. That's not a family business. Yeah. So you have to teach them that. You said, okay, forget about your net present value. What is the net present value of the buyer? I mean, once the buyer buys the company, they're going to bring synergies in. They're going to mean a lot of stuff. So what you should try to figure out is the reservation point of the buyer. That should be your target. Does that make sense? So I'm just using this example to show you how easy it is to focus on the reservation point and not on the target. Does that make sense? Okay. So far, so good? We'll see your results in a moment. Okay, so let me move forward. Information you should not share in negotiation with your counterpart. What information should you not share? Your reservation point. You're not going to tell them, look, I'm willing to go down to 300, because then that's what you get, right? What else should you not share? Your sense of urgency. Because if you have urgency, that indicates that your badna is bad, that you have a bad badna, and you don't want them to know that. What else should you not share? The information that could allow them to figure out that your badna is not good, or that would allow them to calculate your reservation price. That is the information you should not share. The other information you should share. Yes, there is a risk in sharing information, but the cost of not sharing information is most often higher than the risk of sharing information. And the other problem is you do not know what information it is useful to share until you share it. That's the problem in negotiation.
Maybe you don't give them the name of the buyer who's willing to spend the money.
Let's get to that in a moment, but that's a good thought. Okay. We'll get to that one in a moment. So, would you agree with me if I tell you that when the first offer was higher, the final price was higher, and when the first offers were lower, the final price were lower? Do you agree with me? Yeah. Do you accept the idea that people tend to split the difference? They say, okay, I'm here, you're here, let's go in the middle. That's a tendency people have. That's another bias, which is reciprocity. That's another cognitive bias is called reciprocity. If I do something for you, you'll do something for me. In Mexico, they say, ni para ti ni para mí, neither for you nor for I. So let's go and meet in the middle. But meeting in the middle is very common, no? Yeah. Okay. I was on my honeymoon years ago in Luxor, in Egypt. And my wife got cold, so we went into a store, and she found a shawl, and she asked the price of the shawl, and the shopkeeper, very nice guy with a smile, said 50 Egyptian pounds. I have a lot of Middle Eastern students at McGill, so I know them. So I said, let me. I'll give you 3. So the guy looked at me and said, what do you mean? Where are you from? He says, I'm Colombian. Oh, Colombian thieves, right? very, very, very much in the way they negotiate. Then all of a sudden, the lady came with 2 warm cups of tea and gave it to us. What cognitive bias is that? Reciprocity. Now, we're not going to walk out of the store without buying something. Okay, to make the story short, we bargained, and I got the shawl for 10 Egyptian pounds. I was very impressed with myself. My wife was very impressed with myself, until we arrived to the hotel, and I went into the store, which I shouldn't have done, and the shawl was worth 5 Egyptian pounds. But of course, I explained over the tea, and you were cold, so paying 10 was just perfect value. But you can see what happened, right? I don't know if you've been in the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul. Have you? Okay. It's very fascinating because they're really sophisticated, the carpet sellers particularly. You start walking around the carpet area, and they walk to you everywhere, so in the bazaar, but the carpet sellers are good at that. They listen to you, see what language you're speaking. They say a few words in your language. I guess with the new iPods, it's going to be much easier. And then they say, where are you from? They say, well, Colombian or German or Swiss or whatever. What are they doing? They're very shrewd. They're calibrating your bargaining style. They know the bargaining style. They know, and this is, when I do this case in Riyadh, for example, I cannot use the 3,000 range. I have to use a 10,000 range because the first offers start much higher than where they start here. So they know that if they're negotiating with someone who's polychronic, especially from the Middle East, they have to be a lot more aggressive in the first offer. If they're negotiating with someone from Germany, they have to be a lot more conservative because they know they will walk away if the price is too high. They won't even counteroffer. So polychronic cultures, we tend to be more bargainers. Depends, I mean, it varies also, but probably the Middle Easterns are some of the most aggressive bargainers. Syrians, in my experience, Egyptians, Lebanese, and the monochronic cultures tend to be less aggressive. That is not a stereotype. I mean, it varies. The Dutch are sort of an exception there, but it varies. Does that make sense? Okay. So if all these that I've told you is true, if I'm saying, look, the first offer influences the counter offer because people don't go too far away from the first offer, right? You see it here? The first offer influences the final price. So the question would be, who should make the first offer? Uh-oh.
Buyer.
The buyer?
The less power.
The less powerful? Okay.
You don't want the buyer.
Let me ask it. This is a trick question. Sorry. I'm going to take the trick out of it. We agreed that the first offer influences the counter offer and the final price. We agree that, right? Okay? Who do you want to influence the final outcome? Who do you want to be influencing the final outcome? Me. So I should make the first offer. That's an old discussion. You may remember somebody. You took a course with a bargain with Subriman. Who took a course with Subriman? Somebody mentioned that. Oh, okay. Yeah, Subriman has a very beautiful graph to explain this. But anyway, in negotiation in general, like in tennis, the person who makes the first offer leads the negotiation. Of course, if the first offer is poor, the negotiation will be led badly, like if somebody serves poorly, right? But the point is, you should learn how to lead the negotiation effectively. So you should know how to make the first offer, because the first offer influences the counter offer, influences the final price. Does that make sense? People don't like this because it makes them nervous. So, oh, if I make an offer that's not correct, they may walk away. So very often they let the other party make the first offer, with the caveat that I can always correct. That's the first problem. You cannot. Once someone makes a first offer, they anchor themselves to the first offer. And if it's very aggressive, you're going to have a hard time moving them from the first offer. Does that make sense? The second hope they have, which is a naive one, is, oh, if I let them make the first offer, maybe they will make a really good first offer. Has that happened often to you? No. So you should try to lead the negotiation. What Subramanian says is, sometimes you don't have information to make the first offer, but that doesn't mean let the other party make the first offer. It's go and get the information. How do you design your first offer? It's very easy. If you have a target that is well thought out, that you have really researched and that's a correct target, you make the first offer based on your target, which means if you're selling, your first offer should be above 1,200. If you're buying, your first offer should be below 300, right? How much up or how much down? Depends on the culture. In cultures that are very aggressive bargainers, I remember in Lonely Planet they said, look, it's very easy. If you go to the Grand Bazaar to buy a carpet, expect that if they ask for $1,000, the carpet is worth 300. So usually it's 30% of whatever they ask. I don't know where they got that, but that's their rule of thumb. But you can see how powerful the first offer is, can you? And especially in complex deals, when there's a multiple set of issues at stake, making the first offer is even more powerful. I think that's why lawyers say whoever controls the contract, the writing of the contract controls the negotiation. Yeah.
So the part that I don't understand about this is that if somebody makes a crazy first offer,
they may walk away.
Sorry?
They may walk away.
Well, no, the other person will value that person's understanding of the true value of what's being discussed as poor. They don't know what they have.
I'm not necessarily following you. Can you explain?
Let's say that you and I both know that this cup is worth $5.
Yeah.
Right? I should know that that cup is worth $5 before I even start talking to you. I shouldn't just go in and go, oh, I like it. I'm willing to pay $4 for it, but I'll go up to $5. I should go, that cup's worth $5. What should I pay for it? If you come in and say that I want $10 for the cup, I'm going to look at you and go, but the cup's worth $5. I'm not going to say it, but I'm going to go. So you don't know what that cup's worth. So you don't. You're biasing. Are you not biasing the other party by making a crazy offer?
You're biasing towards your first offer, but of course it shouldn't be crazy, because if it's crazy, two things may happen. They walk away, or you lose credibility. They walk away because they believe you. They say, oh, if Pete is asking $10, oh, maybe that's what it's worth to them, so I'm not going to waste my time. I'm walking away. Look, I was working with Bosch, the German company, and this illustrated the case really, really well for me. I made them. We went through the whole process. I presented a proposal for a workshop. They said, "Oh, lovely workshop, very interesting. Is outside our budget. Maybe next time." Didn't ask for a discount. Didn't counteroffer. Next year they called us. It says, "Okay, you renew the proposal?" So again, the same dynamic. I sent the proposal. They said, "Great, let's move ahead." No discount, no counteroffer. In Colombia, I started saying, I'm a serious consultant. So, I'm going to price at what is fair. And I start losing some customers because in their culture, if they don't get a 10% discount, they don't feel they negotiated effectively. And they'll walk away just because they didn't get the discount. There's no objective criteria. It's just they get upset. They don't get the discount. I mean, my measure, why did I think I did a really good deal with the Egyptian? Because I went from 50 to 10. Because he anchored me at 50.
But you didn't know it was only worth 5.
Oh yeah, but that's my fault. I mean, of course, I mean, at some point I was playing in Canal Halil and exploring other things, and at the end I said, I'm not going to waste my time. I'll overpay, which is because it's also overpaying. When you go to a store and buy a T-shirt, you're overpaying, but you don't bargain, right? So I stopped doing it. But clearly they know how to anchor me. They knew how to anchor me. So the whole point is, the first offer anchors the negotiation. You need to make that first offer intelligently. Your target should be a good basis because your target is realistic and ambitious. It has to be two, right? We said you need an ambitious target, but it has to be realistic. How do you calculate your target? I forgot to expand that. Use objective criteria. You say, okay, market value of this is whatever. I'm going to do my research. And that's one way. The other way is if I can figure out your reservation point, which is what we did with the beverage company. If you remember the example this morning, what did we do? We said, okay, what is their willingness to pay? Well, if they transport bottles, they have this overprice. Qualification is going to have this impact, maybe 1%, 2%. And we know our competition has this pricing. So now we know what the reservation point is. And then that was our target. So there is a system to this, but the message is there is a really strong bias in the anchoring effect. In the free trade agreement that I mentioned, when we were negotiating, the US made the first offer. Why? Because they had just negotiated 5 other free trade agreements, so they basically copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. And they made the first offer. Whose offer, that offer, who do you think that offer benefited? By far. It was really good for the US. They wanted us to negotiate based on that offer. And we refused. Well, we didn't say, we were not rude. We just sort of ignored the process of let's look at the agreement like they had done in other free trade agreements in which they have done. Okay, the way you do it is you put a parenthesis at the beginning of the text and a parenthesis at the end. And you put parentheses in anything, in any clause you don't agree with. And then you go clause by clause and says, can you change this? Can you change this? And eventually the US says, no more changes. I've already made a huge amount of concessions to you. But you made the biggest concession by accepting to negotiate based on their text. So what did we do? And we drove them crazy. With 3 rounds, it took us, this is a 600-page proposal, so it takes a while to write it. So during 3 rounds, we just, based on our target, start writing a counteroffer. And eventually, we came and said, okay, this is your offer, this is our counteroffer. Okay, let's see how we can meet somewhere in the middle. That's very different than, okay, I'm going to start here, and I'm going to start doing some small changes here. Now, because some more changes is a little bit here, a little bit here. If I'm here and you're here, that's why you have to learn also how to make a counteroffer based on your target. Now, it's somewhere in the middle. It's not somewhere close to their first offer. So it's a lot more powerful than what people give it credit to really learn how to make the first offer or really learn how to make a counteroffer if you cannot make the first offer. Does it make sense? Good? Questions? Okay, just a few tips on bartering. When I'm selling something, I was selling an office space a few months ago. It was really interesting because I made the first offer, of course, because I published the price of the office. And I got a call from a lawyer, and he says, I talked to my board of directors, and this is typical. And there's 2 techniques, but he used this one. And we can offer you 70%. It wasn't like that, but let's say 70% of your asking price. And I said, and they said, we can budge. This is instruction, a mandate. That's a hardball tactic, right? There's an ultimatum. This is take it or leave it. And we said, leave it. and we waited. A few weeks later, it took like 3 or 4 weeks, he came back and said, we could offer this. It's still too low. It doesn't work. And it kept on going up until he was within the 90% range. And then we made a counteroffer to his second offer, right? We offer, he counteroffer, we counteroffer. But we counteroffer once we had pulled this person up to almost 90% of our initial ask. And we made a counteroffer which was at 97. And then we bargained somewhere, but the middle now is not 70-100, now is 90-100, right? So that's one technique. The other technique, the other thing you need to avoid is sometimes another person said, okay, your 100% is too high. What is your minimum? And people will do this. We'll say, okay, I could go down to 98. No, that's still too high. Okay, I could go down to 95. Still too high. I could go to 90. Still too high. That's called negotiating with yourself. Don't negotiate with yourself. Negotiate with them. So if they say that's too high, say, okay, make me a counteroffer. I want to see how far we are. And then the anchoring effect kicks in, because now they're going to make a counteroffer based on my offer. Does that make sense? And good negotiators, because your target would not always fall in the middle, whether you counter offer or you offer. So good negotiators, what they do is they start a bartering game, right? It's a dance. And as they get close to their target, they take, and that's what we did with the office, we took longer responding, and we made smaller and smaller concessions. And the sense you give to the other party is that you're being brought to your reservation point. So there's a whole psychology in this. This is like very basic bartering, but still is important to know, because at some point, once you expand the pie, you have to split the pie. And when you split the pie, you have to know these techniques. Does that make sense? Let me see if they have your, oh, look, she did a really good job. That's Daniela. So this is you. This is you, right? This is you guys or not? Maybe she has that doesn't make sense? Yeah, it must be you, because it's just 8 groups. Yeah? So, wow, you did very well. Okay, but look at here. First offer, counter offer, final price. So this person was pulled really much towards the first offer, even when they counter offer. First offer, counter offer, final price. Again, this person was pulled towards the first offer very hard, even when they counter offer. Here, first offer, counter offer, final price. So it was the opposite. The counter offer pulled the first offer quite a bit, right? Both made too many concessions instead of saying, okay, a little bit up, a little bit down, a little bit up, a little bit down. And this one accepted the first offer. But you can see the anchoring effect. All the first offers were pretty low, and the final price was very low. And most offers were based on the reservation point, not on a target. You see it? Okay? And these are the special negotiators. So we have 4 special negotiators. So I'm going to tell you my version, and then you can complement with what you did. So I told you this morning that if you walked away with anything, I wanted you to walk away with the idea of focusing on the process, not the outcome. Is this what you did here? Well, at least 4 of you focus on the outcome, not on the process.
I would say with Joan, it was more about pie.
Which group were you?
I was 1, Joan was 2.
Okay, yeah. So yes, those are the special agreements. But 3, 5, 6, and 8 were focusing on the outcome, not on the process. Because what does it mean to focus on the process? At least it means understanding the motivation of both parties. Focusing on the outcome is, how can I get the highest possible price if I'm selling and the lowest possible price if I'm buying? Does that make sense? So these people, whether intentionally or not, and I'll let you speak to your agreements in a moment, they all at some point exchange information. And this is what I've observed happens in this case. The buyer comes in, and at some point the seller says, well, why are you interested in the sugar bowl? Well, because I have 3 pieces, and the sugar bowl allows me to complete the set. And the complete set is worth more, or is more interesting, or more valuable than an incomplete set. So I'm interested in your sugar bowl. Oh, you have 3 pieces. So how interesting. I have a collector who is looking for a full set. What are you going to do with your set? Oh, I want to sell it. Where are you going to sell it? Well, my idea is in a consignment store. Oh, very interesting. I think the collector may pay more than the consignment store, because the consignment store is going to sell to a collector. So why don't we do something? Why don't we agree that you have 3 pieces, I have 1 piece. So a first basic agreement could be 3 is 75%, 1 is 25%. So we could sell to the collector, but I'm bringing the collector. So that should be another 10%. So why don't we agree that we go to the collector, and if the price of the collector is good for you, I get 35% of whatever we sell the whole thing to, and you get 65%. Why does that expand the pie? Because if the buyer buys the sugar bowl, they're going to negotiate based on an availability of $8,000. That's the top amount for the full set. And they have to discount whatever they pay for the sugar bowl from the $8,000. If they agree to negotiate with the collector is willing to pay $12,000. The seller knows that. So the basis for value creation is not 8, it's 12. Where is there more money to split? With the collector. So you're better off going to the collector than simply selling the sugar bowl. But for that, you need to exchange a lot of information. That's why we say focus on the process, not on the outcome. People say, yeah, but if I tell them that I have 3 pieces, he's going to take advantage of me. Maybe he will, or she will. But let me give it a spin. I get migraines very often. And I don't know why I use this example. I invented it at some point. I still use it. I should change it probably. I get migraines. So I always carry one of those migraine pills that work for people who have migraines, because Tylenol, definitely don't take Tylenol. Tylenol doesn't work for migraines. So let's see. Jessica has migraines. Anybody has migraines here? Anybody really has migraines? Pete, who else? Nobody has migraines, you're lucky people. Well, when you have a migraine, you become dysfunctional. I mean, a really bad migraine, you cannot operate. It's simply you cannot operate. So let's say Jessica has a migraine, and I have my pill. And I said, Jessica, I see you have migraine. What is your need? You want to get rid of the pain. So I'll sell you my pill for $100. Because now I know what her need is. Will she pay $100? No. She'll go down to a drugstore, pay $5 for the pill, and then resolve the problem. That won't work if we're in the desert. So it's not that you know my need that makes me weak. It's that you know I have no alternative. Do you see the difference? And people think that, yes, there's always a risk in them knowing my need, because they can extrapolate, they can figure out. But that's why we are precise, and we says the risk of sharing information is lower than the cost of not sharing information. Because if you don't share information here, you negotiate based on an availability of $8,000. If you share information, you negotiate based on an availability of $12,000, $4,000 more. Does that make sense?
Fair enough. But like in this, we talked about how a critical factor in sharing information is trust.
Yes.
I think in this situation, there wasn't enough time to get that trust.
Okay, fair. That's fair. But what I've learned is I've repeated so many times to myself, focus on the process, not on the outcome, that my mind works automatic. I engage in a negotiation, and if I have to spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes building trust, if I do it well, is usually good enough. Of course, I do it much better if I prepare beforehand, and I looked you up in LinkedIn, I invited you to LinkedIn, I research you, and I come up and it says, I forget your name, Hamad? Hamad, it's very nice to meet you. I see you went to McGill. I love McGill. I don't know. What I find is the excuse of not having time is usually a poor excuse. But there is very few negotiations that are immediate. Most of your important negotiations, of course negotiations are immediate, but most of your important negotiations, you knew they were going to happen, and you just didn't plan for them. So that's why I say focus on the process, not on the outcome. And the problem we find is people don't see the importance of preparation. They rely on intuition, because intuition is convenient, doesn't require much effort, and it makes you feel special. It says, well, did you prepare? No, I'm an intuitive person. That doesn't work. You're intuitive, you're going to be biased by somebody who knows how to use cognitive biases big time, right? So it's about planning, but I understand. Yeah. Here, of course, you know each other. Yeah.
So, what does trust? First off, yes, trust is very important. But in expanding the pie, you didn't need to trust the other person. The initial stage is just
No,
gaining a common understanding of the value.
No, you need to, and that works with monochronic cultures. With polychronic cultures, you might find that they don't tell you anything until they feel they have enough connections, and they won't share information. They need those connections before they move forward. So I'm saying maybe you didn't need to build trust, but if you build trust, you have a better chance that information exchange is going to happen. That's it.
I totally agree that building trust is important. Just that initial stage of gathering information and talking about interests, and maybe that's how you build the trust is, you have something, I have a common interest, maybe we can do something better together.
Yeah, my guess is you're more monochronic. With a Japanese person, that won't work. They spend a lot of time building trust before they even start talking about the deal. And with a Latin, neither. A Latin will they'll talk about football, they'll have you drink tequila, it'll take a little bit of effort. So it varies. And of course, it's different. In monochronic cultures, trust is about transparency, is about effectiveness. So I'm not going to waste your time, Pete. These are my interests, and what are yours? That doesn't happen with a monochronic culture. Somebody was, okay, yes, Jessica.
What if the other party did not prioritize the option that would lead to, maximize the value?
Okay, great. So this is your problem now. Now you have more techniques to negotiate, and you're going to go out into a world where people don't know how to negotiate. And so you're not going to be able to say, okay, Pablo, Pete, I took a course with Pablo. This guy from Colombia, he knows a lot about this stuff. Let me tell you how this is done. That's not going to work. What works is to follow the process. When you follow the process, the other, by reciprocity, tends to follow the process 90% of the time. Yes, there's people who are impossible, but that's 10%. If 90% of your negotiations flow smoothly because you follow the process, you're pretty much ahead. So that's what I mean.
So in this case, what if the buyer wanted to just collect the sugar bowl for,
it wouldn't have worked, yeah. Then, it worked because the case, precisely these cases have a spin, and if you explore, you find more value. Do group 1, 2, 4, and 7 want to share quickly what they did so everybody else can see what they did? Yeah.
So we did a lot of talking and exploring about what each of us knew about the items, and was able to come to a point where we understood that the sort of the bigger pie.
Yeah, the 12,000.
We didn't leave it at 12. We assumed 12.
No, that's good. That you shouldn't share 12 because if you tell the buyer 12, you're revealing your reservation point. So you should say, I have a collector.
We both agreed that was the value.
Okay.
Because that's on both pieces of paper, right?
No, not 12. They don't. The buyer doesn't know it's 12.
It's at $10,000 to $12,000. This is why
No.
Now I'm getting
No,
it.
the buyer says the buyer knows that the sugar bowl has been similar sugar bowls have been sold between 3,000 and 1,000. The buyer.
Between 4 pieces over 10 and 12.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, you're right. I forgot that. Yeah, at the beginning. Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, we quickly got to there's more value as a set.
Okay, no, good. Yeah, I forgot that part. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then
So
I asked a bunch of questions about his knowledge about the one piece, and where he got it. Who does he know that looks for these pieces? We get to the realization that he knows people that he can sell the item to.
okay.
Right?
So a lot of information exchange.
Yes. And then we rushed the end.
And then.
We rushed the end
We-
because we ran out of time.
Oh, okay. But you had already. I forgot. So you figured a full set is between the potential of a full set is between 12 and 10, but that must be a collector because a consignment store needs profit.
He knows people.
He knows people because he's an expert.
And then we split. We just said we'll split the sale.
How do you split it?
70-30.
Oh, that's not bad. So it's 30 for the seller, including a slight commission, and 70 for the buyer.
That wasn't his offer initially, but
But again, you made the pie bigger, and then you have to go back to bargaining, right? Good. Number 2.
That was us. We had a very similar approach where there was a lot of information sharing.
Yeah.
We started with a price each, but I started at the low end, she started at the high end.
Can you tell me what you did?
So I said 300, she said 1,200, and then we came to the special agreement because we were so far apart.
Okay.
And the idea was we'll make more money if we work together.
Okay.
So let's do that, and we had some back and forth about how to compensate for her knowing the buyer and her expertise. And we ended up with a tiered system. So the higher the price that she ends up getting, the more money.
Oh, clever.
And the lower, the less money to a certain extent. And she's doing a
Okay. Oh, good for you.
extra so it felt like a good.
Okay. So again, you see how you need to expand the pie, and then you need to divide the pie. And the best way to divide the pie, not to destroy the collaboration that you've built, is to find fair criteria on how to split the pie. But now you have a much bigger pie. Great. Group number 4?
I didn't share the information that I knew that worth $12,000.
But that's okay. That would be sharing your reservation point, okay?
That's it.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. So we had I would receive 400 upfront for that, and we split between the incremental value with a threshold of 8,000. So we will split the 4,000.
Okay.
I would receive 45, and they would receive 55%.
So you would receive,
incremental value.
okay, so you would receive 450 plus 45% of 4,000.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Okay.
That would be 18,000.
because as a buyer, you know that the full set goes to auction from 6,000 to
Yeah.
whatever value you can sell it to up to 12,000. So there's an upside for both of us that with the full set, I can get it bigger.
Okay. Very important is one of the things that they warn you of is, and that's a little bit Roger Fisher's fault. Once you get enamored of this idea of creating value, you may lower your guard when it comes to claiming value. So be careful. Don't expand the pie and give most of the pie to the other party. Make sure that once you first discover what the new pie looks like, and then go back to bargaining and say, okay, where should I anchor to get a nice slice of that new pie? Okay? Group 7.
So we started on our trust building information.
You started last night on trust building.
Very, very efficient.
Lots of wine.
we got to a split very quickly. We didn't land on a specific price. We focused on what the split would be, and we landed at an 80-20 split, assuming a minimum 10,000.
Okay. 80 for the
80 for
the seller.
80% for the going to the person who had already had 3 of the 4 pieces.
Oh, okay. 80% to, of course, the buyer and 20% to the seller. Okay. My warning is, again, once you make the pie bigger, make sure that you stop and think, okay, how can I justify a bigger piece of that pie? Because I think you could have justified 3 pieces, 1 piece, 25 for me, 75 for you, but I'm bringing the buyer, 10% commission, that's 35. So again, it's the trick of once you made the pie bigger, don't forget that you have to claim value again. Does that make sense? Yeah. No, but that's good. Team now is looking to be. Oh, fair? Okay, questions? Was it useful?